Hello, in this example, I want to do both. I want to find the domain and the range of the graph. So let's begin with the domain here. So remember that the domain is the set of all x values that satisfy the boundaries. So we have to find the lower bound and the upper bound of the x-axis here. So let's begin by just reading from left to right. So we go from left to right, we go, and we see that we have this lower bound here. So we have an open circle. So we're going to cut through this circle with the vertical line that is dashed. So here we have this dashed, a lower bound, and this is going to be at -3. All right, perfect. So now we keep going to the right to see where the upper bound is. So we keep going right, and then here we still have the graph moving. So we have to keep going right, and then here this is the final value of our graph if we're reading it from left to right. So here we have a closed point. So we're gonna cut through it with a solid line. So here we're gonna cut through this graph with a solid line, and now we have 4 here as our upper bound. So for any general x from left to right, it's going to get squeezed by a -3 and by this +4. So let's write the domain. So the domain of this graph is going to be -3 less than x, and then less than or equal to 4. This less than comes from this open circle, and then this less than or equal to comes from the fact that this was closed. So now we're solid with the domain. Now we have to be solid with the range as well. So I'm gonna do that in yellow. So we have to find the range, and then here. Okay, so here we're gonna read the graph from bottom to top. That's how we find the range, the set of all y values that satisfy these bounds. So let's begin by finding the lower bound. So we start at the bottom and we go to the top, and here we find our lower bound. So let's cut through it with a horizontal line, and since we have a closed circle, the line is going to be solid. So here we have a -4. All right, perfect. So now let's keep going to the top, and then here we encounter the upper bound, which is this open circle. So now we're going to cut through it, but this time with a dashed line. And since it's y, so we're looking at the y-axis, it has to be horizontal. So here we have this horizontal line, and it's at +3. So now for any general y, this y here is going to get squeezed by a lower bound of -4 and an upper bound of +3. So here, let me rewrite this. So my range is going to be a -4, less than or equal to y, and then less than 3. So remember, again, I want to highly emphasize that we read from bottom to top for the range or for the y values. That's why the -4 is my lower bound and the +3 is my upper bound. Now this less than or equal to symbol comes from this closed circle, and this strict inequality with no equal to on the bottom comes from the fact that my upper bound is basically this open circle. Okay, I want to do one more example. So let's take a look at this graph. So now let's begin by first finding the domain. So in order to find the domain, we have to look at the x values, and we have to read from left to right. So let's begin. So here, if we start moving to the right, we see that here's the point in which our graph begins. So this is our lower bound, and it begins at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And since we have a closed circle, we can cut through it with a solid line. So here our lower bound is going to be a -6. So that's great. So now we have to find the upper bound. So if we keep moving to the right, we keep moving, we see that our graph comes to an end right here. And this is going to be the upper bound at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here we have an upper bound of +6. And now our domain can be specified because our x, the set of all x's, is going to get squeezed between these two bounds, my lower bound of -6 and my upper bound of +6. So we can rewrite this as x is less than or equal to +6 and x is greater than or equal to -6. And now these equal to symbols come from the fact that we had closed points right there. So let me specify this here on the right. The domain is going to be -6 less than or equal to x less than or equal to +6. Alright, now let's find the range. And to remind you, the range is now going to be the set of all y values that are within our bounds. And for the y-axis, for the range, we have to read from bottom to top. So let's begin. So once we keep going up, and we see that we have this lower bound here at this closed dot, and it begins at 0. So since it's closed, we can draw a horizontal line that is solid, and this is going to be 0. Perfect. So now let's keep going to find the upper bound to see where the height of the graph ends. And we see that it's right here at this value, which is going to be at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, we have a closed circle, so we can graph it with a solid line here. We can do our bound with a solid line at +6. So now for our range, the range is going to be squeezed between this 0 and this 6. And again, I want to highly emphasize that for the y values, we read from bottom to top. So the range is going to get read as 0 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 6. So that is going to be the range.